And welcome back, everyone, to the Pokemon Team Creation Series. Today's Pokemon Team Creation Series suggestion comes to us from, I want to see if I get this name right, Leanne Stego Production? Was that it? Who asked the question of, what is the Pokemon team of Susan Murphy, aka, I believe, Gigantic Woman from Monsters vs. Aliens? It's not one of, I believe that was DreamWorks. It's not one of DreamWorks' better movies. I wouldn't go so far as to say it's bad. It's certainly got its moments. It's certainly wacky. And again, is Monsters vs. Aliens DreamWorks? It's been so long since I've seen the movie. I'm talking long time. And I think I only saw it once. Monsters vs. Aliens, 2009. Holy crap. You'd think it'd be longer, but who was? Oh yeah, yep. That was DreamWorks. I was right. I mean, it's not like it's a god awful film or anything. It's I would say is one of the weaker DreamWorks films. I think that is a fair thing to say. Now, if you love the film, great. I'm not trying to brag on that. Susan Murphy, though, ultimately got exposed to some weird science shenanigans, some sort of chemical, I believe, that turned her into a gigantic woman. Now, in the series, apparently she can control this effect, this growth effect, but ultimately, the movie, she couldn't. So what do I do with this? A woman who is gigantic. What exactly do I do? Well, let's start out with the few that made the most sense in my head to start with. One, I wanted at least a couple relatively large Pokemon on this team. So I went with Wailord, who, up until Eternatus came around, was the largest Pokemon that ever existed. Eternatus is actually the largest Pokemon at 65 feet long. Yeah. And then if you go Eternamax Eternatus, it's like 1,000 feet long or something like that. Its base stats actually does become like 1,000. But Wailord, I just like Wailord. I think it works, honestly, just perfectly fine. It's a relatively peaceful Pokemon. Wailmer, which would be your starter in this case, would start out large, but on the small side, and then turn into this massive thing. By the by, someone did mention in the Bubbles video, Bubbles Powerpuff Girl Pokemon Creations video, that they thought that the starter should be a 3-stage like all starters are. And are you including outside games like, say, Gale of Darkness or Coliseum, where you get Eevee and Umbreon, in which case, not all starters are 3 stages. But B, if I pigeonholed I know there are other YouTubers who have done that, but if I pigeonholed myself into doing that, I would probably, the teams I don't think would work as well. Because I'm not looking for a certain structure for a team. I'm looking for the Mon I think best represent the character. So if there are 6 Mon that aren't starters that could represent a character, but I have to force myself to put a starter on the team, that doesn't work in my head. That doesn't work for me as a team creation series. So that's just my take on it. That's why I do it the way I do it. Doesn't mean you can't do it a different way. Just the way I do it. But yeah, I decided to go with Wailmer first. Then she is described as being athletic, and because obviously she's intelligent too, and sometimes even smarter than Dr. Cockroach or Professor Cockroach. Is it Doctor or Professor? I can't remember. But so I decided to go with a fighting type and a feminine but flexible fighting type, and Hisuian Lilligant. I think this works out well. It's a waifu Pokemon. Let's be honest, the customary waifu Pokemon they describe. It is also a fighting grass type and flexible in that regard. It's a very acrobatic Pokemon in that sense. Then I wanted to go with another relatively large Pokemon. Now, I could have gone Eternatus just because it's the largest, but I ultimately didn't want to do that just because it was the largest. There was nothing else that fit with it other than being the largest. Wailmer being a generally nice Pokemon, but still being a pretty strong Pokemon, at least beefy at any rate, I think worked a little better in this case. And because it evolves from something that's small and goes to this huge thing, I thought also worked. But I went with Milotic. Now, Milotic is a good standard Pokemon for female-based characters to go with because it's considered one of the most beautiful Pokemon there is. It's also large. It's around 19, I want to say, 19 feet long. It's like 19 or 21. It's not quite as large as Gyarados at 21. Milotic size. I want to say it's around 19. Actually, it's 20 feet 4 inches usually, and weighing about 357 pounds. So it is a large Pokemon. Absolutely, it's bigger than, say, a Dragonair, which is 13 feet long, almost as large as a Gyarados. So it is certainly big enough to qualify for a large Pokemon, but also being feminine helps because Susan is still a woman. She was a woman who was going to get married. Um, she looked very nice in her wedding dress. And I'm sure, down the road, if she could manage a relationship, she'd want something more from that. So just because you're female doesn't mean you still can't be. That's not the right way to put that sentence. I know some people try not to, when like doing characters and things that associate with characters, doing things that lean towards like the feminine aspects for women because, oh, is that all she is? No, that's not all she is, but women can be feminine. So I don't see anything wrong with Milotic, especially if you think that maybe she had this when she was getting married. Like this maybe was her core 3 initially before she got married, but then in the Pokemon universe, when the incident happened, however it happened, her Wailmer evolved and Feebas evolved also. So, and maybe she had a Hisuian Lilligant to begin with. Now, the last 3, because she really just doesn't have a lot of character or enough character to make a full Pokemon team based on that. And really, all she is large and powerful. That's all she really has going for her in terms of like abilities. But she also has friends who are also monsters. So you have the Blob, who was, I believe, voiced by Seth Rogen, if I'm not mistaken. Grimer and Muck are really the only Blob Pokemon that really exist. So I went with Grimer. I didn't want to go Muck because I felt like Grimer just made more sense. He's not like super powerful in that sense. He's basically nigh indestructible, and theoretically can absorb things into his mass and stuff like that, grow bigger. But I thought Grimer worked better here. Then Dr. Cockroach, I think it is. Is it Professor or Doctor? Hold on one second. That's bugging the hell out of me. One second. Professor Lame. Professor Cockroach. Yeah, okay, it is. Or Dr. Cockroach. No, apparently it's more Dr. Cockroach. Now, we to date do not have a cockroach Pokemon. I am very surprised by that, as a matter of fact. And in fact, if we were to do, like, say, a normal bug type that wasn't like a special form of a Pokemon or something, I would say a cockroach makes the most sense. It's kind of like the most standard kind of bug you could do. But there is, like, the closest you hypothetically could do would be, let's say, Pheromosa for the Ultra Beast. And I did consider that. I really did, because it would still fit with the more feminine aspect to Susan, but being a fighting type leans more to the acrobatic and physicality of it, because that is a glass cannon of a Pokemon. But the problem is that with Dr. Cockroach, he's an intelligent character. He's super smart. So that doesn't lend itself towards Professor or Dr. I keep saying Professor, but Dr. Cockroach. So I decided to go with the tried true Blipbug, because it's a bookworm. That's basically it. And he's a very tiny guy, so that works too. Finally, you have the missing link. And unfortunately, we do not have a true missing link Pokemon right now. We do not have something that is an amalgamation of Pokemon, but naturally created. Like, it is the bridge between two different types of Pokemon. We apparently, the Whirlipede and the Scolipede and the Centiskorch line have a common ancestor, so you could do a missing link that way. But there is no missing link that is a fish, monkey, whatever out there. It just doesn't exist. What we do have, though, is a Chimera that's man-made in type Null. We do have this Pokemon, and I do think this is good enough. I think we can make that work. If I were to say immediately what her ace would be on this team, it's probably either Milotic or... yeah, it is probably going to be Milotic, because Milotic's got the... or Milotic. It's got, I think, the best base stats. It also has, I think, access to the best move pool apart from type Null, but type Null isn't a Savali, so it's not... Because otherwise, if it was a Savali, I would probably lean to a Savali, because Savali would have, I think, the overall best move pool, but I think Milotic acts as a race. So her starter would be Wailmer to start with, going into Wailord, then Hisuian Lilligant, then Milotic, then Grimer, Blipbug, and type Null. I will give my take on both if this team were fully evolved, as well as the standard team I got here. But first and foremost, how balanced is this team, like always? The good news is it's not super weak to any one type. Like, there's no 3 or plus weaknesses on this team, But there are a lot of 2+ weaknesses. There are 2 Mon that are weak to electric with Milotic and Wailord. There's 2 Mon that are weak to grass, Milotic and Wailord. There's 2 Mon on the team that are weak to flying with Blipplug and Lilligant. There's 2 Mon on the team that are weak to Psychic with Grimer and Lilligant. And then there's 2 Mon on the team that are weak to Fire with Lilligant and Blipbug. Surprisingly, that's it though. There's really no crossover otherwise. So that's at least good. Now, something else that I'm now doing is addressing how strong this team is against certain types. Like, what types does this team, in theory, have really good advantages against? And there's quite a few, actually. First and foremost, with just having grass and water on the team with 3 Mon, you automatically are having a strong advantage against ground and rock. So right out the gate, you have 3 Mon on the team that can just go toe-to-toe and just clap rock and ground types easily. You also have 2 Mon on the team that can handle fire very well with Wailord and Milotic. And they're relatively strong water types, so you're going to be able to handle that no problems as well. You also have a fighting and a bug type, so that means you should be able to handle dark all right, although your bug type is extremely weak. And then last but not least, grass types. You do have a poison type on the team, and you have a bug type. Now, granted, both of them are under-evolved, and Blipbug is a is a first stage early route bug, so it is going to suffer in that regard. Now, with that being said, the age-old question now takes place. How well would this team do? Now, with the beauty of the first 3 Mon on this team, which are basically your heavy hitters, and Titan All comes in at the very end, is that you can have Lilligant and Milotic immediately. You're not going to have to wait for them to evolve down the road because of the evolution methods they have. Stone and Trade, respectively, or Beauty if you want to try Gen 3. Now, Wailord, because you start with a Wailmer here, Brock and Misty are going to be no problem because Wailmer and Lilligant are easy to handle. They're easy to handle with those two. Surge is going to be where you're going to struggle first. This is because you have 2 water types on the team that are just going to get kind of taken down pretty hard. Milotic's definitely beefy, so it could handle a couple hits. But with Lilligant, you should be able, because it does at least resist electricity. After that, though, you don't have any problems with any of the other teams until or any other gym leaders until the Elite Four, honestly. No joke, honestly. Because even Erica with grass types and grass poison, because you can, I believe, you can do learn Scald with Milotic. I don't know if it learns Ice Beam naturally, unfortunately. 1 second here. Milotic, where's Cerebi? Where is its... Because if you can have an Ice Beam Milotic, you're going to handle any grass type gym without fail. Without fail, honestly. So Sword and Shield. Oh, okay, this is Sword and Shield. Now, does it learn Ice Beam naturally? No, it doesn't, sadly. But it does learn Dragon Tail naturally, which is actually and Twister, as well as Recover and Hydro Pump. So I'm in Coil as well. So and Recover. Recover is a big one because it can only recover at only 28, which would be right around when you're fighting Erica. So that's not god awful in terms of being able to handle Erica. Now, granted, the grass type moves are still going to hurt you, so Erica would still be a problem. But if you can get past Erica, you shouldn't really have that much of a problem with Koga. Shouldn't even have that much of a problem with Sabrina. You won't have any trouble with Blaine or Giovanni. And Lorelei and Bruno, honestly, are not going to be that difficult because they just don't have any strength against you. Where you're going to run into a problem, though, is Agatha. Because it is Agatha all along. But no, seriously, with Agatha, you run into a bit of a wall. Because this team isn't overly strong against poison types or ghost types. Now, granted, she doesn't have any real strength against you either, but because of that, it's kind of just a neutral team against her. And she does have Arbok, Golbat, Gengars, so you're going to have to try, and none of your fighting moves with Lilligant or normal moves with Type Null are going to do anything against that team. Then you got to deal with Lance, and again, not knowing any ice types moves or is it not going to help. And the only fairy type move Milotic learns naturally is Disarming Voice, and that's not a very strong move. So you are also going to struggle against Lance. And then Blue comes in, and unfortunately, his team is so balanced that the weaknesses that this team has, Electric, he's got him on for that. Flying, he starts out with a Pidgeot. Psychic, the Alakazam is there. Fire, he's either got an Arcanine or a Charizard. Grass, Venusaur or Executor. He's literally got a Mon that can take care of 2 of your Mon. So no matter what, like every one of your weaknesses is covered on his team. Now, if you were to say max out Silvally, Blipbug to Orbeetle, which would be a bug psychic type, would that, and Grimer to Muck, would that help? Honestly, no. It actually really wouldn't help. Silvally would be probably the one big help you would get, but weakness that you had with Blipbug is mitigated by turning into Orbeetle. You might gain a resistance or 2, but they're not resistances Blipbug didn't already have. So, as a bug type, or anything that would really, or that Blue has. Basically, being a bug psychic doesn't change the weaknesses and Mon that Blue has to handle those weaknesses, is what I'm trying to say. The Blipbug's main weakness would still be either flying or fire, and he's got that locked. So, and then Silvally would at least be able to tank some hits. I'll say this, if you do have a fully evolved team and your Muck doesn't get clipped by the Alakazam, maybe it's possible, but otherwise, no, you cannot be the champion. And honestly, I'm going to actually tell you right now, I'm going to cut out the middleman here. There's only one, with this team as it is, one team that, or one champion that you maybe could beat. So let's just get to it quick. Johto, you will actually get all the way to Claire with this team because Wailmer is bulky enough to handle the Flying Gym, and after that, you will have a fully evolved Lilligant and Wailmer, still bulky Wailmer, and after that, you have a fully evolved Milotic and a Lilligant who's got fighting type moves. So, yeah, after that, you can just kind of clear all the gyms up until you get to Claire. Claire's the first one you're going to really struggle with because there's no strength against dragons in this team, and dragons are bulky as hell. You might literally stop at Claire, to be honest. If you can get past Claire, if you can, you still then struggle with Will, because Will is a Psychic type Elite Four member, going to take 2 of your Mon down immediately, so now you're already fighting an uphill battle. And Blipbug is going to go down quick too, because it just doesn't have the stats, which is going to leave you with Type Null, who's not the strongest until it turns into Silvally, Milotic and Wailmer, who are pretty much bulk with special attacks. And Will might be where, honestly, you probably would stop at Will also. Koga isn't even going to be that easy either, now that we bring it up. Then there's Lance, who's the straight-out Dragon Trainer here, and at that point, this team's not balanced. Even if I max the whole team out, Orbeetle, I think, would come in clutch against Will. So you definitely could clear Will at that point. This is assuming you can still get past Claire, by the way, which, with a fully evolved team, possible. Then at that point, you're just dealing with Lance. Now, with fully evolved Mon on the team, it's not impossible now. But the problem, again, comes down to you just aren't that strong against Dragon types. The 3 Dragonites alone are going to clear, because money, and then there's the Gyarados, which you don't have anything strong for except Lilligant, kind of. And even then, it's got flying type, so it's resistant. It's just not likely you could beat Lance even with this team fully evolved. What about in Hoenn? Well, I think you're going to get all the way to Winona before you really start to struggle, but you'll have a full team. So, I always used to think water was weak to flying, but it's actually just neutral. So, your 2 Mon, Lilligant, and Blipbug would go down, but Milotic and Wailmer are bulky enough, along with Type Null, to, I think, be able to clear Winona, but it would be difficult, particularly that Altaria. Then you would honestly get through, I think, the rest of the gyms no problem. Even get through the first 2 Elite Four members without too much difficulty, thanks to Dark being so weak to fighting. Ghost, you're not really strong against her team, but you're not that weak. And even, I think it's Glacia, the Elite Four, the Ice member of the Elite Four, you should be okay, to be honest. You'll be more or less neutral. It's, again, Drake and Steven. you can't beat these guys. You just can't. Their teams are too beefy. They have too much firepower, literally in some cases, and you just don't have the typing or the stats to beat them. Even fully evolved, you don't have the typing or stats to beat them. Sinnoh, no joke. Gardenia might be where you stop. Now, why Gardenia? Well, because even with a Lilligant there, her Rose Raid actually is going to outperform your Lilligant because it's a poison type. And Wailmer is not good against grass types, especially that early on. Again, it's beefy, but it's not going to have what it takes. So I honestly think you're probably stopped at Gardenia. But if hypothetically you could get past her, which is what I always at least try to bring up, you can get all the way to Wagner before you're going to struggle. And the big struggle here is the fact that you have understated Pokemon with Blipbug, Type Null, and Grimer. And your two of your biggest hitters, 2 out of 3 biggest hitters, weak to electricity. So you're probably not going to be able to handle Wagner. And even if you could get past Wagner, you still got to then deal with Elite Four, which actually this team isn't bad against, all things considered. Even a bug team, it's not that god-awful against. But even if you did it by some miracle make it all the way, Cynthia's just going to put you down pretty hard. But I'm not even sure you get past Gardenia, so that's a no. Unova, you're going to stop at Elise. That's just it. She's got a perfect team to counter you. 3 electric types, Emolgas with Aerial Ace to take care of that Lilligant. You can't get past that. Even if they did, you'd be stopped at either Drayden, Iris, or Marlin in Black and White 2. Caitlyn, the Psychic type, I believe that's the Psychic type, Elite Four member. Iris, you wouldn't be able to beat either. 3 dragons, 3 non-dragons, and then there's Alder. Alder is the one individual you might, that's a huge might be able to beat. But even then, this team's actually not strong against bugs, and half this team is bugs. Bug Steel, Bug, and Bug Fire. The Volcarona would go down, but by the time the Volcarona comes out, your Water-type Mon are probably dead at that point. Not to mention the Buffalon hits hard. The Druddigon is very powerful, and the Vanilla is just kind of or Vanillux is kind of a wild card. So yeah, no, you're not looking good here. Even with a fully evolved team, it doesn't look good because you still have to be able to. You still just wouldn't get past Elise, I don't think, Elisa. Then you got Kalos. Honestly, Ramos is your biggest problem to get past initially, and Clemont because of grass and electric back-to-back, you're going to struggle hard. Then you got to deal with the Steel and the Dragon-type Elite Four members. And then Diantha's team, honestly, that Hawlucha alone is going to cleave through most of your team. That thing outspeeds everything on this team. It's going to take down the Lilligant, no problem. And then even if you manage to get past that, assuming you've lost a few amount of Mon at this point, you then got to get past the Tyrantrum, which because it's Dragon, is going to resist water, so it's just neutral. The Amora if you got some water, great. If you don't, you're in trouble. The Goodra also is tanky, so yeah. And that's not even bringing up Mega Gardevoir. So even if you had a miracle and made it through Ramos and Clemont, you would still be in trouble. Absolutely. Then in Galar, you're done at Milo because he's the Grass-type gym leader. He's also the highest level first stage gym leader there is. And then you got Gigantamax going on. So yeah, you're not beating Milo. That's just, you're not getting past the first gym. In the hypothetical where you do, you would get all the way to Raihan and then you would lose. Because even with Savali, Muck, and Blipbug, if I maxed it out, you still got a Druddigon and Flygon who are going to resist the water type. So right there, Sandaconda and Gigalith will not. But then you've got to deal with the Gigantamax part of that, and they're both hitting extremely hard. You might be able to make it past Raihan. I'll say that. You might. But you're still not getting past Milo. And then you got to get past Leon. Finally said it right for a change. His Aegislash alone, you don't have a good answer to. So it's going to cleave through probably the weak half of your team. You'll maybe manage to take it down. And then the Dragon Bolt's either going to Thunderbolt or Flamethrower the rest of your team. Again, why was that not his ace? I don't know. And give that a Gigantamax. Come on. Aircraft Carrier, Dragon Bolt. That logic is just so sound. And then finally in Paldea, you stop at Iono. You can't get past her. I will say this. You would be resistant to Iono. You definitely would. But your Milotic and your Wailmer at the time would just go down quick. Yeah, Lilligant could resist and go through a couple of them, but ultimately it's just going to go down. It is, even if you could manage to get through there, you would stop Elite Four wise, because that's how far you would actually manage to get. You would get through the rest of your gyms. At Poppy, surprisingly, this time around, Rika is not a big a problem. But Poppy, you have nothing for Steel except for a fighting type Lilligant, which will eventually go down. Its stats are good, but not good enough to take on the entire team by itself. And even if you could, you then got to deal with the flying types on Larry's team, and then the dragon types on Hassel's team. So, yeah, it's a no-go. Even if you fully evolved, you would still be screwed at Poppy. Because Steel, frankly, no mon on your team would be good against that Steel type. And then the flying type would not be all that solid either. Or all that good for you either. Especially because there's a flying fighting, there's a flying grass, which would be good against your 2 water types. It's just not a good situation. Either way, though, that's my thoughts. Let me know in the comments below what you think. Thanks for watching. Hope you enjoyed, and I'll see you next time.